the question is, if Iran was making overtures toward Saudi Arabia or vice versa, and they came together, experts are saying one of the things that could suffer in that deal is the petrodollar deal. Why is that so important? Make us understand that.
It was because the entire petrodollar-dollar link, all the oil that's traded globally is currently pegged to the U.S. dollar. It's denominated in the U.S. dollar. And this was, as you said, done in the 1970s. So because of that, the entire commodities market, as well as all imports, exports, they are all currently denominated in U.S. dollar. One reason is because the U.S. dollar is currently the world's currency reserve.
Right.
And how did it get there? Well, one could argue which came first, the chicken or egg. Did they become the currency reserve first, or is it because of their monopoly on the commodities market that gave them the power to become the currency reserve of the world? We don't know, but oil accounts for up 2 to 4% of GDP in worldwide trade. And that is something substantial. So if you control the oil market, the commodities energy flow, that's something that every single country needs as an import, then that is going to be huge. And that makes every single country dependent on the US dollar.
I would imagine if I was an American neocon, an American banker, business person, I would be so concerned about this, because let us suppose that the Saudis decide to get back together with Iran, and somewhere in the process they start seeing themselves not as a vassal of the United States, but really part of a bigger world sort of thing, and they say, you know what, we're going to pull out of that petrodollar deal. That lets the genie out of the bottle, because suddenly China may have the same idea and say, we don't want to use the dollar either. Russia could step in and say, we don't want to use the dollar either. Certainly Venezuela.
Actually, they've already done so.
Really?
They've already done so. In the past year, China, Russia, as well as India, they have been lowering their U.S. dollar reserve because they no longer want to deal with the U.S. dollar hegemony, their monopoly on trade, essentially, that all trade must be denominated in dollar. So because of that, China and Russia have already started trading commodities and as well as other exports in their own currencies, the ruble and the RMB. And it makes perfect sense for the countries to use their own currencies. So Russia also traded with India, and they successfully completed their trades in 2019. Venezuela and Iran. Venezuela wants to move to their own petro coin, which is a blockchain cryptocurrency denominated in oil that they're currently using to get around the US dollar as well. So these individual countries, they all want to use their own currency. They no longer think it's fair or it's needed to use the US dollar.
And of course, the Saudis are the Mac Daddies in all of this, because they have the biggest oil reserves.
Exactly. So Russia, President Putin, he's actually been calling for all the countries to drop the US dollar simply because the US has been accumulating too much power. He's actually been calling for this for over 5 years, but none of the countries really listened to them until in 2019, when the US started to unilaterally issue sanctions that weren't really justified. So now all the countries are starting to pay attention, and because of that, China follows suit, India follows suit, and also Europe. Most of the trading there is all done in euros now instead of the US dollar.
That's fascinating. And to think that the United States, it would not be beyond them to then use military force or military might to make sure the status quo remains the status quo.
Exactly.
Because changing that would be a real big economic hit.
It would be a huge economic hit, and Saudi Arabia is basically the linchpin of it all, because Saudi Arabia alone, outside of OPEC, controls 1/10 of the entire world's oil supply, which is equivalent to that of Russia and the US.
Nobody smarter. Christy I, thanks for coming out.
Thank you.